So basically the market trading sideways, but bearish sentiment continues, and there is just some concern. Will there be a sea change? Will things change for Nigeria in 2012?
Afternoon, Lerato. Thank you for having me again. To answer your question, I think there's a lot that's going to happen in this first quarter that will set the pace for the rest of the year. Like you correctly mentioned, the banks seem to have been doing so well and been at the, on the leaderboard for the trades on the NSE in terms of price appreciation also. And I think that was to be expected. Last year, we saw concerted efforts to reform and address the weaknesses that were in the banking sector. And I think those have begun to get and yield fruit, even as we saw a number of those transactions were closed successfully last year. For instance, the EcoBank Oceanic merger, the Access Bank and Intercontinental acquisition and follow-on merger. I think those are positive signs that we're moving in the right direction for the sector. And I think we can expect that that should continue. If you take a quick look at the banking sector, for instance, as a whole, we find that most of the banks are trading at fractions of their book value. And I think we can put some reliance on the fact that most of the non-performing loan issues have been resolved, and book is actually book value we're actually looking at, and so we can expect that sector to actually improve in the first quarter and going forward in the year, because they actually play a central role to the Nigerian markets.
But will it be all banks, Efe, or the tier 1 banks? Because in the last week, it's the traditional banks, it's the diamond banks, first banks, ETIs that have been on the leaderboard. Yes,
I think right now, banks and I think I'd say other companies as a whole have come to appreciate the fact that, look, you must be transparent and timely in your reporting, and it's a tradition I think has caught on amongst the other banks and companies listed on the exchange now. So yes, we've seen the traditional banks actually realize these gains and make record gains on the exchange. But I think for the sector as a whole, we can expect this to be the case, because the perceived weaknesses that were in the system have to a large extent been done away with. They've been resolved and addressed. It's not 100% done yet, but most of the really pressing issues were dealt with already. So I think for the whole sector, we should see appreciable and good performance.
All right, talk to us about your evaluation of the fuel subsidy debacle, the political fallout, eventually the government cutting the petrol price by about 30%. There is a sense that even though inflation has moderated a little bit in December, it's going to be a real test of will and strength in 2012. That's really going to be where the challenge is. And as a result, those defensive retail stocks might not be so defensive in 2012.
Very, very correct, Lerato. In terms of the subsidy, I think, deregulation always is a good thing for an economy or for a sector, but one thing that investors and other participants always require and demand is clarity, in terms of the decisions you're going to be taking and how they're going to be implemented. Markets thrive on information, so information must be concise, timely, and it must be clear. So it's not just good enough to have a good policy. At the end of the day, time and time again, we've always seen that if you've got policies that are not implemented very well, at the end of the day, they're as good as bad policies in themselves. So what Nigerians, I'd say, I think people really require and want now is clarity on the part of the government and on the fact that it's going to pull through with its reform programs and all the other pieces that would make it really worth the while and make people smile or really support the reforms.
Very quickly, political risk still weighs heavily on the conscience of investors, particularly security issues. It was violence during the protests, it's terrorism and Boko Haram, and there's a sense that the president hasn't really been decisive in dealing with these problems.
Okay, it's really a sad thing. It's sad where we are now as a nation and with these security challenges. And obviously it's going to, or it's already having a big impact on the interest of investors, looking to do business in Nigeria or increase the share of business they do here. I think right now what we are focused on doing in terms of the government and other stakeholders is really to be able to give investors the assurance that, look, we've got a grasp and a hold on what's happening right now in our nation, and we're going to take decisive steps to make and bring appreciable change, you know, and give some people give people a level of comfort, you know, in terms security-wise. You know, it's really, it's a tough one for Nigeria, and it's a tough one for the government, you know. Yeah. But I think they would, right now it's become obvious that they need to do everything possible to give people comfort, in the nationals, indigenous Nigerians, and also foreign investors.